Hi, Mom Intellectuals. This is Jackie and Mimi from Modern Gen X Woman. And I will let you just quickly introduce yourselves again, and then we will carry on our conversation. This is part 2. So
we're happy to be back. Thank you.
Yes.
I'm Jackie Ghedine.
And I'm Mimi Bishop, and we're co-founders of a company called Modern Gen X Woman, and we are career coaches. Jackie is the career coach and business coaches. I'm the business coach, and we work with Gen X women and helping them really up-level where they want to be professionally.
And
so one of the things we were talking about, sorry. We have a little bit of a delay on the podcast, ladies. So,
Okay.
So if you're hearing this is real time and we're having a little bit of a delay. Go ahead, Tamsin.
I was just going to say, we kind of started this conversation in part 1 with saying, acknowledging that it's part of what the three of us want to do is to help people find their own personal definition of success. You call it success on your own terms. And part of that process can be having to deal with pushback, whether it's in the process of finding out what success is for you in the face of people trying to push you in a direction that isn't right for you. But also, even if you get to the point that you feel you have created at least what you think success is and are heading in that direction, dealing with pushback can be very difficult. And you brought up at the end of the last part that it's also about creating a new identity, that creating a new version of success might mean, and maybe always means, figuring out who you really are and who you are in terms of that, because it can mean changing careers, it can mean leaving a marriage or entering a marriage, or it can mean all sorts of things that really hit home with who we think we are. So
yeah,
well, you were trying to talk and I interrupted you, so I can let you go.
Excited. I want to jump in because we kind of also wrapped up in talking about grieving the old version of ourselves, even if it's something good that we're stepping into. And talking about our emotions or processing our emotions is something that we are hearing more and more about. But for our generation, it was like, get up and dust yourself off and get back in the game. Like, you didn't really, we were told, don't cry at work. Don't show them that you're weaker. Don't show your emotions, try to stifle things down. So now there's a piece of us where we need to learn how to process those emotions. One of them being grief. And also one of them recognizing that even when it's a good situation, it may still hurt. So for me, when I finally left my corporate job after 18 years, I couldn't wait because I wanted to really start a business. I wanted to be an entrepreneur in the worst way. So this was a dream come true. What I did not recognize was how hard it would be to leave my coworkers. The grieving process, that this may sound silly, but like I wouldn't see the guy that made my salad every day, the coffee guy, my friends that I took the train with. Like my routine was so disrupted, and that was hard to step away from. Even though this was something that was really a dream, I was very surprised by the pain of it, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
When I hear that too, you said something, Tamsin, before, which you said, every time we step into something new, we have a new identity, right? When you have a kid, or when you become a parent, or you lose a parent, when you step into a new job. And I think that's probably the crux of the problem, right? Is that our identity should be, my identity is Jackie, right? That's my identity. A leadership coach, a mom, a wife, those aren't my identities, right? So I always try to say those, instead of, I think what we do as women specifically is we wear those like a mask, right? So I'm going to put my mom mask on. This is my identity right now, or my boss mask on, or my employee mask on, or my entrepreneur mask on. And it's not masks. They're just hats, right? So they don't consume who we are. They just change us a little bit. And I think if we look at it that way, we can relinquish the control that identity has on us, especially in mid-career, when a lot of women either haven't gotten to the success that they wanted to get to, or maybe their peers have gotten to, right? So now all of a sudden their identity is that they are not as successful, which I say is BS. Or they have these big careers and they realize, I don't want to be up here anymore and I want to step down. And how do I do that? So if you just understand that your identity is you, who you are, and that each of those are just hats that we wear, they aren't masks, they aren't disguises, right? We're still who we are. And I think that's a really different way. And if we could visualize that, I think we can kind of change that, step into those changes easier.
I hope so. And I think in talking with you about this, it brings to mind too something that I really noticed. People are talking in society now a lot about privilege, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel in some sense that I'm dealing with a problem that is a very privileged problem, because I had to get all the success things before I realized it wasn't going to make me happy, and it wasn't going to be what I really wanted, what was going to really serve me. So in some sense, I felt very lucky. And it was a very hard thing to say, look, I got it all, you know, especially since the last thing I got was having my son after several years of fertility treatments and several miscarriages. And that was shoving down a lot of grief and putting it like, what do I do next? This is going to make me happy. What do I do next to get this? Right. And then to finally have my son, have him be reasonably healthy. And you folks are in the US, but in Canada, we get a year maternity leave. So talk about a huge change from full-time work to sitting at home, never alone, but not having my friends to talk to. Like, it was a huge change, but it was like, I wanted this. This was going to be the thing, you know, harps, cymbals. I was going to be happy. That for some reason it was in my mind. This is just, I will be happy when. And I got there and I was miserable. I loved my son. I was so glad to have him, but I was tired and I couldn't shower without him screaming for me. And it was newborns are hard, right? But I couldn't accept that I wasn't happy all the time, because I had checked all the boxes, right? So there are people out there who can't afford food. There are people out there who get fired or can't find decent employment. Like, in some sense, it feels to me a little bit, and I just have to accept this is the area that I relate to. This is how I can help people. And there's no pain Olympics, right? My pain and your pain and the other pain of other people who kind of are in the same situation. Pain is pain. And I think those of us who kind of get quote unquote everything that we thought would make us feel successful and are miserable still deserve to be helped, and our pain is still real. But I just kind of do also, maybe this is one of my little things I'm still dealing with, is to say, there are other problems out there too. And I don't know to the point that people get to the spot I was without being very privileged in some sense.
Right. I mean, that's an excellent point. And at the same time, you said something that's really critical. Pain is pain, right? So it's something that has to be addressed, in that if you're really struggling and suffering, what is the piece that really needs to be examined? And, you know, it's kind of like, it's hard when you see other people who are truly struggling, and here you may be with like the great job and a nice car and a beautiful home and family, and yet you're still struggling. And there's a sense of guilt that creeps in, right? Mm-hmm. But not allowing yourself to have what it is that you want is not helping the person that doesn't have, that is less fortunate either, right? It's not like, you know, you by going after what you want is not precluding someone else from getting what they need as well. And even in a lot of cases, I would even argue, when you have what you need, you may be able to fill your own cup and help support others that really do need a hand. And the other piece I'll add to it as well is that I believe if you are someone that is sensitive to others in the way that you just described, you'll make sure that people behind you, or, you know, you'll find a way to pay it forward.
Mm-hmm. It's just, one thing that I found really hard was the feeling alone, feeling like I was broken, like everyone else must have figured it out. And it was confusion about what on earth do I do next. But it was also, on top of it all, embarrassment, because I did it to myself, right? I got all the things. I'd been talking for years about how happy I was going to be. And it was a struggle to even admit I wasn't.
Yeah. Well, I'm
So
sorry,
many
Jack, I'm
layers
going to
to
jump in again. Also, I think also, you know, the other thing that's disillusioning is we always believe when we get whatever it is we want, life will be perfect. I'm never going to have a headache again. My hair is going to look perfect every single
Right.
day, you know, like all of this stuff. And that's not reality, right? So we always have to consider, when we get to where we want to be, we're still going to be dealing with the day-to-day things that are a struggle. And when we understand that, that also makes part of it, I think it really helps us with not feeling disappointed when we get there and it's like, oh, like, you mean I still have to color my hair because it's still gray, you know?
I still had all my feelings and I didn't expect it. And when you say it explicitly and clearly that I just thought I would always be happy after that, it sounds dumb. But it wasn't a
we're taught that.
It wasn't a conscious, it wasn't really a conscious thing that I will only ever feel happiness. I'll never have another sad day in my life. It was, but it still was shocking to me that I wasn't happy. So it was one of these things that I think is just kind of in the background, that you just kind of assume, and that you never, we talk, you know, about mindsets or hidden beliefs or whatever. There are lots of different ways of calling it, but that thing about I still have all my feelings, but I didn't expect to, was one of the things I talk about in the book about being the most shocking to me. And I really hope that with the book, with the podcast, you know, you talk about it, a lot of issues like this in your group, that just people, I think, need to know they're not alone as a first step to realizing that they're not the only ones that are somehow broken. And I don't think we are broken.
Right.
There's a lot of stuff that's not working, but I think we feel broken when we feel like the only one.
Yeah, and I think happiness is, I think that there's this golden, you know, the holy grail of happiness, right? Like, I want to be happy all the time. And I think there's a couple different things. One is that the things that make us happy versus the things that we think make us happy are very different, right? It is scientifically proven that actually, if you really want something and you get it, and it actually, your happiness actually goes up, right, when you get it, but afterwards it goes down and sinks lower than where you were before, scientifically proven, because we think that that thing is actually going to cure our happiness, and when it doesn't, we don't go back to maybe level 5, we go down to level 2.
We're disappointed.
So I think, it's right, it's disappointed, but it's all of these layers. So I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions, is that whole idea of like happiness and what that looks like and how you attain it. But the other side is, even if you were happy all the time, you wouldn't know it, because in order to feel happy, you have to feel sad, right? In order to feel joy, you have to feel frustrated. There has to be contrast. So what we need to recognize is that when we feel good, enjoy the good. When we don't feel good because something's not working for us, explore what that looks like, and don't put pressure on yourself to have to go out and get something more, right? But recognize, like, what are the things that make me feel better? And a big piece is, you know, having relationships where you have reciprocity versus feeling like you're empty after leaving them, right? Or not comparing yourself, or having healthy reference points as opposed to reference points that are unachievable, that make you always feel like you're never going to get there. And so there's lots of scientific ways to kind of build your happiness, but knowing that it is never a thing that makes you happy. It just isn't. And I'll just share a funny story. My husband's like, we need to move south because then we could swim in the pool all year round. We could be outdoors all year round. And I'm like, I don't want to be. And he's like, what is wrong with you? I said, I appreciate the pool, the convertible, and being outdoors so much more because I don't have access to it all the time. And there's proof in that, right? So how do we create these experiences that we really appreciate when we're in them and we can't always have them? And so those are all the things that can make us feel more complete. I get really excited talking about it because we chase the wrong things. And if we just chase things that are different, experiences will live on where something that you buy doesn't. So it's all of those, and just trying to experiment with those can make a big difference.
Yeah. And I think too, this might be a slice of what can result in pushback, internal pushback, is when we assumed we'd be happy, we're not. So then we maybe, for some people, get this, well, I'm doing something wrong. My definition of success that I've come up with all this work to figure out who I am and what I want, maybe it's not right, because shouldn't I be happy all the time? And yes, emotions are meant to come and go. That's what they're there for. But we're not usually taught that, right?
Which goes back to your point, Tamsin, of getting there and being like, what's wrong with me? I'm broken. And it's very scary. It's very easy. If you're not aware of that, it's a very slippery slope that happens fast, because number one, you're afraid, you're embarrassed to share with someone. You feel like you shouldn't feel this way because it's like, I'm complaining about something I wanted.
Shame.
Mm-hmm. And it really, things start to unravel really quickly unless you start to understand a lot of these nuances that we've just been talking about.
And the hardest thing, one of the most valuable things I learned was how much of it I did to myself by having so little self-compassion and thinking I must be a horrible person and a horrible mother and da 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 da, right? The me. And just
so common.
Yeah, just working at that inner voice, understanding that I need to be a friend to myself. Just really, I was saying stuff to myself I would never ever think of saying to even somebody I didn't like.
Yeah, right. It's like, when do we stop giving ourselves grace, right? The grace to have feelings, the grace to not to be human, right? The permission to be human. At some point, I think that I think this might be partly generational too, which is we have become this superhero persona. We grew up like, you're the Wonder Woman mom, you're super mom. Nobody ever says my husband goes and picks up my daughter from school and he's super dad. Nobody says that, right? But I'm super mom. Like, we put all of these unrealistic beliefs, and then we think that we can't feel a different way. And that just ends up hurting us. And so for anyone who's listening, I hope that this resonates for everyone to know we all have those feelings. We've all had those feelings, and we're going to continue to have those feelings because these things come up and they change, and that guilt comes up and the blame comes up. But we really need to learn to recognize that we're human beings first, right? And if we're human and we give ourselves grace, then we will give ourselves permission to make mistakes and to falter and to feel unhappy, and that's okay. It's okay. And I think post-pandemic, okay, but that is okay.
Yeah, it's a new world, right? And the pandemic has been a grieving experience for everyone, even people who didn't get very sick or lose loved ones, because for a while at least it changed. I mean, we still have changed how we live, but a lot of people are kind of going back to whatever new normal is. And yet a lot has changed. I mean, people are still talking about businesses that closed down, or people, lost their jobs, or all these things have changed. And our medical system, we got whammed and all sorts of things. So
I think also just the innocence that we've had, I think that to a certain extent, our generation, I'm going to put myself out on a limb a little bit and just say, like, we didn't experience things that may have been as difficult as like our grandparents or our parents even, right? Like World War II and things where like life was very difficult. And that we experienced during the pandemic. And it was kind of like the grieving of an innocence, I think, a little bit. Like it was a wake-up call that life can get really difficult for everyone really quickly.
Yeah. And
so
people getting politically polarized over something that maybe shouldn't have been a political issue, but hugely turned into political issues. And yes,
people need someone to blame. I mean, that's part of, that's part of human nature, is they just want to place blame. It makes people feel better. And it's partly why humans struggle with each other, because they don't want to take even ownership on their own for their own actions. So I feel like blame is a big part of why things like that happen. And we just need to recognize that we just need to be open. Like, things are going to change. The way things looked yesterday might not look the same tomorrow. There's no guarantee. And we just need to step into it with, okay, how am I going to make the most of this, even if I hate it? I might hate it, but I got to make the most of it. I can't give up. There's no alternative. Right. That's the other thing, is like, there's no alternative.
I'm glad you said that.
Yeah.
Well, there is an alternative, but then that talks about like the quicksand again, and then you get really pulled under. Right.
Mm-hmm. And I think, I don't know your feeling about how many people I hang out with, the growth mindset people, right? There's the, what is it? Growth mindset, and whatever the opposite one is.
Fixed, I guess.
Stagnant or whatever. Fixed, right. So I'm very much, I like growth mindset people. I like people who, if they see something that they want to change, even if they know they can't change it themselves, but change isn't necessarily a bad thing. So many people almost act like change is a bad thing, but that we can grow and we can learn. And it's part of stepping into uncertainty, is that you're going to learn something from it. You're not just carrying the weight of everything. That it's going to bring hopefully some new good stuff. But
and surrounding yourself with people like that will propel you. And I think there comes a time in our lives, especially in our 40s and 50s, where friendships really change, because what solidified friendships often changes. Maybe you're friends because your kids were friends, or maybe you were friends in college, and you get to midlife, and I'm always like, it's time to prune your friendships, right? Our time is minimal, so you have to prune the friendships that aren't go back and forth, right? That feel one-sided, or friendships that are the anchors that are holding you down versus the helium balloons that are lifting you up, right? So I always say to clients, like, take a look at the people around you, and do they make you feel like you are lighter or heavier after you've left? Like, truly, are they a helium balloon or an anchor? And if it's an anchor over and over again, you need to make some really difficult choices about that friendship and what it looks like. And there's so much to that. And we just don't recognize enough about the people we surround ourselves with, and how much impact, even if we don't want them to have on us, they absolutely have on us.
Which goes back to where we started this conversation, right? Where we try to change, and people are like, putting every obstacle in our way, so that we either second guess ourselves, or we just sometimes give up, right? And it's sometimes we have to just move through that. That's
I want to punch through the box. I don't want to collapse it. I don't want to step out of it. I just want to punch through it, because come on, let's throw a caution to the wind at this point.
Yeah. And with friendships, I definitely have my core group of people who I regularly am in contact with, who we can talk about our feelings, we can talk about our struggles, and feel heard, like listened to. And when we're ready to talk about solutions, we're there too. But the first thing to me is feeling like someone actually cares, because I have my core groups, and I've realized I needed to move some people just a hair outside the core group, because they're the ones interested in telling me what to do. I care about some of them very much. A few of them I've let go for other reasons, but I care about them very much, but when I'm really, really struggling and I need to be heard, they're not the ones I can go to because they just
Right.
want to tell me what to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. You need
right.
to know who the people are for where you are at in
Yes.
whatever process you're going through too.
And people without judgment, right?
Yeah, it's
The world
important.
judges enough. I don't
Yes.
need
And
anyone
we
in
self-judge too.
right, in my inner circle that's going to judge, make judgments on the
Yes.
choices that I've made, the decisions I've had, the struggles, right? Because that's just not that. There's no time for that.
Yeah.
But it does. It makes a big difference. And you do, like to your point, you move some people out, you prune them, right? You don't cut them away. You don't weed them.
You don't give a
you
hack.
prune them, right? You
I
prune
mean,
them.
sometimes you do, right? I
Right,
have
sometimes
a
you
few,
do.
but
I have had that, but you know.
Yeah. Sometimes when you also go through a very traumatic situation, right? I have a dear friend that lost her daughter. And after that, like, people that it changed her perspective. And it was kind of like the friends before and the friends after, and that happens sometimes when you're just shaken to the core. And, instead of kind of pruning, it's almost like an earthquake that kind of uproots everything. But that's part of the process sometimes.
Our growth process.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Cool. All right, we're getting to the end. I would love to just do a little recap of kind of the main things you can do to deal with pushback. And so we've talked about practicing self-compassion. We just talked about being very conscious and aware and considerate about who your friends are. And I think those are two very, very helpful kind of practical things to think about. We talked about focusing on identity, realizing your identity is probably going to change, that it's normal, and it might feel tricky or challenging to do that. What else? What am I missing? And I'm going to go back.
Yeah, we also talked about grieving. Yeah, we also talked about really feeling the emotions and grieving for even the old identity that you're ready to get rid of. There still might be some grief around that, was one of the things that we had talked about.
Yes.
And giving yourself grace, right? Learning to give yourself grace as a human. We are flawed. We are imperfect. We don't need to be, we don't need to prove anything to anyone, not even ourselves, right? If you're a good human, just operate that way. So I feel like that's another thing that we touched on.
Yeah.
And also, think of all of the labels and all of the titles that we have as women. They aren't our identity. They're just hats that we put on and off, and they don't have to take over all of our being. And just be grounded in who you are as a human, and as Jackie, as Tamsin, as Mimi.
Yeah.
I think that was the other one.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, both of you, for joining me again.
Thank you, Tamsin. Yeah.
You're welcome. So, Momtellectuals, I did mention in the first part, I think, but Jackie and Mimi are back. And if you want to listen, we didn't have video last time, but we have episodes 128 and 129 if people want even more of you. And there will be ways in the write-up of this, ways of getting in touch with you and finding your Facebook group, and ways of following you, because I'm sure you're all over social media and findable.
We are.
You mentioned Facebook and LinkedIn, right?
Yes.
Facebook and LinkedIn. And we just love being having you as part of our community, us being part of your community. When we have women, like-minded women who are really propelling other women forward, and men, it's just amazing. So we should all be proud of where we are, and how I love how collectively we're trying to create a movement for women, to really own who they are. And that's amazing. It's exciting.
Yeah. And it's nice that we don't have to be, it's not at anyone else's expense. Nobody has to be left behind, right?
No.
Come along for the ride is what I always say. Come along for the ride.
Okay, well, thank you both again.
Thank you, Tamsin.
Thank you.
Okay.